She looked at me with that calm, knowing smile, the kind only someone who's lived more life than you ever could has, and said, "I'm old enough to be careful." Then her voice softened, almost daring me. "But with you, I won't be." The first time I noticed her, it wasn't because she was trying to be noticed. It was the opposite. She sat in the corner of the cafe where the light fell softest, a warm amber glow spilling across her face and catching in her hair like the last light of evening. She wasn't scrolling through her phone or busying herself with anything loud. She was just there, still, present in a way that made everyone else seem restless by comparison. I'd gone there to sketch. It was something I did when my head felt too heavy with thoughts, when I needed a place to focus without being reminded that at 24, I still didn't quite know where I was going. My table was by the window, sketchbook open, pencil moving in half shapes and half thoughts. But my eyes kept drifting. She was older. That much was clear, though not in the way that people say it like a limit. No, she carried herself with the kind of assurance that only comes from time. Her back straight, her shoulders relaxed, like she'd long ago stopped apologizing for taking up space. Every gesture was deliberate. The way her fingers curved around the handle of her cup, the slow stir of her spoon as if she wasn't in a hurry to be anywhere else. There was grace in that, and a quiet kind of rebellion against a world that always seemed to want us rushing. Her face, there was something about it I couldn't stop cataloging. Not perfect, not untouched by life, but deeply beautiful. A small line at the corner of her mouth, as though she had learned to smile with restraint. Eyes that lingered on the world like she was weighing it before deciding if it was worth her attention. And when she did smile, just faintly, to herself, at something unspoken, it felt like watching the sky break open after a long stretch of clouds. I remember the moment she lifted her cup and her gaze passed across the room. Not at me, not yet, but in my direction. My chest tightened in a way I didn't expect. I ducked back down at my sketchbook, pretending to be absorbed, though my pencil had stilled completely. I told myself I was just curious. Curious about the way she seemed untouched by the noise around her. Curious about the life behind those eyes. But beneath that curiosity, there was something else. Something sharper, more dangerous. A pull. And I couldn't help thinking, she doesn't belong to this restless world. She belongs to late nights and slow talks, to the kind of silence that doesn't press for answers. In that moment, I didn't imagine speaking to her, didn't imagine she'd ever notice me. She was a study in distance and composure, someone who lived in a world just outside my own. But even then, before a single word passed between us, I felt it, somehow, she was going to matter. It happened on the third afternoon I saw her. Same cafe, same corner table. By then, I'd begun to expect her presence, though I told myself I hadn't. I'd sit near the window with my sketchbook, convincing myself I was there for the light, for the stillness. But the truth was, I kept hoping she'd be there too. That day, my pencil moved across the page with less purpose than usual. I was sketching the outlines of a chair, the curve of a window pane, anything to keep my hands busy. Then her voice drifted over, smooth, low, with a trace of playfulness. "You draw like someone twice your age," she said. I looked up, startled. She was standing near my table, her cup in hand, eyes resting on my open sketchbook. There was a calm certainty in her gaze, the kind that made me feel both exposed and seen. I'm not sure if that's a compliment. I managed, my voice catching on the edge of nervous laughter. Her lips curved into a smile that was neither rushed nor exaggerated. "It is," she said. "Most people your age scribble impatiently, like they're racing time. But you draw slowly, carefully, as if you're afraid the world might disappear if you don't catch it." Her words caught me off guard. No one had ever described me like that. I looked at her, and for the first time, I let myself study her up close. Her eyes were sharp, but not unkind. They seemed to hold entire stories I hadn't earned the right to know yet. I cleared my throat, trying to gather some composure. "Maybe I'm just slow," I said lightly. She laughed then, not loudly, but warmly, like a soft ripple in water. That sound stayed with me longer than I expected. "No," she said. "You're deliberate. That's rare." She leaned slightly over the table to glance at the half-finished sketch. I caught the scent of her perfume, something subtle like citrus with a trace of spice. Not the kind of fragrance that shouts for attention, but one that lingers, making you turn your head long after she's gone. The space between us narrowed in that small gesture. My hand tightened around the pencil, suddenly aware of how close she was. I could see the faint lines at the corner of her eyes, not signs of age, but of a life lived with both laughter and restraint. When she straightened again, she met my gaze directly. "You're too serious for someone so young," she said with a small smirk. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to argue, to insist she was wrong. Another part, the quieter, truer part, knew she was right. And then she smiled. Not politely, not distantly, but with a softness that felt like an invitation. For the first time, the distance between us didn't feel impossible. It wasn't long before our meetings stopped feeling like coincidences. I'd walk into the café or the library, and she'd already be there. Or I'd arrive first, and she'd find me. Neither of us said it aloud, but it became a quiet rhythm, a pattern that seemed to choose us rather than the other way around. This time it was the library. She found me tucked away at a small wooden table near the philosophy section, sketchbook open but barely touched. She carried 2 books, both thick, worn at the edges, the kind that looked like they had lived through years of rereading. "Mind if I sit?" she asked, though she was already pulling out the chair across from me. I shook my head. Of course. For a few minutes, silence stretched between us, the kind that isn't awkward but alive. I sketched, she read, and every now and then I caught her watching me from behind the page. Eventually, she closed her book and laid it flat on the table, her fingers brushing the spine as if she wasn't sure whether to let go of it. "You know," she began softly, "people assume confidence is natural at my age, that just because you've lived long enough, you stop doubting yourself." Her words surprised me. She wasn't smiling, not in the way she usually did. There was something fragile in her tone, something careful. I set down my pencil. "And it's not true." She let out a breath, not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. "Not true at all. I'm careful with people, with what I give and to whom. Old enough to know better, as they say." Her eyes flickered toward mine, searching, then darting away again. "I've made mistakes. Some I'd rather not repeat." Her honesty pulled something loose in me. I wasn't used to people being that open, especially not someone like her, who seemed so composed. I swallowed, my throat tight. "I get that," I said finally. "People assume I don't know anything, because of my age, because I haven't lived enough. But that doesn't mean I don't feel just as much." Her gaze returned to me, steady now. There was no teasing in her eyes, no trace of amusement, only recognition. As if, for a moment, we stood on the same ground. Then it happened. Her hand reached across the table and rested lightly on my forearm. Just the weight of her fingers warmed through the fabric of my sleeve, but it sent a rush through me that I tried, and failed, to hide. Her touch wasn't dramatic, not meant to startle. It was grounding, reassuring. And yet, under that simple connection, my chest tightened, as if my heart had decided it had been waiting for that exact moment. She must have felt it too, because she didn't move away right away. Her thumb brushed once, just barely, and then she pulled her hand back with a quiet smile. "That's the trouble with us both," she said softly. "We feel too much." And just like that, I knew our conversations were no longer just conversations. They were something far more dangerous. It was the rain that brought us closer than words ever could. The city had been humming all day, the kind of restless noise that makes you feel like you have to move faster just to keep up. By the time the sky cracked open, we were already walking side by side. Me with my jacket pulled tight, her with nothing but a thin umbrella she hadn't bothered to open. The rain fell in steady sheets, soaking the pavement, scattering people in every direction. We ducked under the narrow awning of a closed shop, pressed closer than we had ever been before. For a while, we said nothing. The storm gave us an excuse. The rain clattered hard against the metal roof above us, each drop a reminder of the small space we shared. My shoulder brushed against hers, light at first, then firmer as the awning forced us closer. I could feel the warmth of her body against mine, the faint rise and fall of her breath. She tilted her head back to watch the rain, strands of damp hair falling across her cheek. She didn't brush them away immediately. Instead, she let them linger, eyes distant, lost in thought. You know, she said at last, her voice almost drowned by the storm, life has taught me one thing very clearly. I glanced at her, waiting. Her expression was calm, but her fingers curled against the strap of her bag, as if holding something steady. It's taught me to be careful. She gave a small, thoughtful smile, almost as if she were speaking to herself more than to me. I've made choices I thought were bold at the time, but looking back, they were just reckless. I don't want to be that person anymore. I nodded, though my chest ached at her words. Careful, I echo, my voice low. That makes sense. Her gaze shifted to me then, sharp and unwavering. There was no distance in it this time, just clarity. She tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear with deliberate slowness, then let her hand fall to her side. But with you, her words trailed off. She let them hang in the air, heavy, dangerous, before finishing softly. With you, I don't feel like being careful. The space between us seemed to collapse in that instant. My breath caught, the air thick with the storm and the weight of what she just admitted. Her eyes searched mine, not for permission exactly, but for understanding, some sign that I felt it too. And I did, more than I could ever admit. My pulse hammered against my ribs, and I wanted to reach for her, to anchor her hand back onto my arm like before. But I didn't. I couldn't. The line she'd drawn was thin, trembling, and I was terrified of crossing it too soon. Instead, I held her gaze. The rain pounded around us, loud and relentless, but all I heard was her voice echoing in my head. With you, I don't feel like being careful. And though I said nothing, though I didn't move, I knew the world between us had already shifted. After that night in the rain, something changed between us. I felt it every time I replayed her words in my head. With you, I don't feel like being careful. And yet, instead of drawing me closer, it pushed me back. For days, I avoided the cafe. I told myself it was because I was busy, because I had deadlines, because I didn't want to be distracted. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid. Afraid of what it meant, of how much her words had stirred something in me I wasn't ready to face. Afraid of what people would say if they saw me with her. This woman who carried herself with a maturity I could never fake. When we did meet again, it wasn't planned. She was sitting at our usual table, a book in her hand, steam curling from a half-finished cup of tea. I froze in the doorway for a moment, debating whether to walk out before she noticed me. But then her eyes lifted, calm and steady, and caught mine. There was no anger there, no accusation, just a knowing softness, as if she'd been expecting this. She gestured lightly to the empty seat across from her. I sat, but not the way I usually did. My posture was stiff, my words clumsy, my smile forced. She noticed, of course. She always noticed. "You've been quiet," she said finally, setting her book down. Her voice wasn't sharp, but it left no room to hide. "I've been busy," I offered, though even I didn't believe it. She leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on the table, her eyes never leaving mine. "No, you've been thinking." A pause, then softer, almost a whisper. "You're pulling away." Her directness unsettled me. I looked down, fiddling with the edge of my sketchbook, but her silence pressed on me until I couldn't bear it. I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted. My voice felt raw, unsteady. "You're you, and I'm just me. What would people think if they saw us together?" Her expression shifted then, not into a smile, but something gentler, deeper. She reached out, closing the distance across the table, and let her hand rest close to mine. Not quite touching, just close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "People will always think what they want," she said quietly. "That's their business, not ours." Her gaze softened further, her voice low, steady. "Don't let the world decide what feels right in your own heart." Her words lingered, heavier than the rain had been that night. I wanted to believe her, wanted to let her closeness dissolve the fear clawing at me. But even as I nodded, even as I felt the pull of her presence, the battle inside me didn't end. It only grew sharper, the ache of wanting her, and the fear of what it would mean if I did. And she knew it. I could see it in her eyes. She was patient, but she was waiting. It was evening when we found ourselves walking together again. Not planned, not arranged, just one of those quiet alignments life sometimes offers. The city was slowing down around us, the last of the daylight bleeding into the street lamps, their glow soft against the wet pavement. We didn't rush. Neither of us ever did. Our steps fell into an unspoken rhythm, the kind that made it easy to forget time. Every now and then, our shoulders brushed. At first, I thought it was accidental. But when it happened again, slow, deliberate, neither of us pulling away, it felt like something more. For a while, we talked about nothing. The weather, the city, a new café she wanted to try. But beneath the surface of every word, something heavier pulsed, waiting. Eventually, I broke. My voice came out quieter than I expected, carrying more by honesty than courage. I don't know if I can be what you need. She turned her head, her brow furrowing slightly. What do you mean? I exhaled hard, the truth spilling out like it had been waiting all along. You're you. You've lived, you've seen, you know who you are. And me, I'm still figuring it out. I'm afraid you'll wake up one day and realize I'm just some kid trying too hard to keep up. That I'll disappoint you. The words hung there, raw, vulnerable, almost embarrassing. I kept my eyes fixed on the ground, afraid of what I'd see in her face. But then she slowed, enough that I had to stop too. When I looked at her, she was smiling, not wide, not amused, but something softer, deeper. A smile that seemed to hurt her just as much as it comforted her. You already are, she said, her voice barely above the hum of the traffic. I blinked, confused. Already what? Already enough. Her eyes held mine with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. That's the part that frightens me. You don't even realize how much you matter, how much you've already shifted things for me. And I don't know what to do with that. I couldn't speak. My chest was too tight, my throat thick. The weight of her words pressed against me in a way that was almost unbearable. Then, as if to save me from drowning in the silence, she slipped her arm through mine. The gesture was simple, unforced, as natural as breathing. But the warmth of her against me, the light pressure of her hand resting in the crook of my elbow, sent a current through me that I knew I'd never forget. We walked on like that, connected, our steps slower now. Neither of us said the word that was heavy on both our tongues, but we didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full, alive, charged with everything we couldn't yet say. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the quiet. The park was nearly empty that night. A cool breeze moved through the trees, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and late-blooming flowers. The city hummed in the distance, but here, on the edge of the quiet paths, it felt like the world had loosened its grip on us for a while. We found a bench beneath a lamppost, its light soft and golden, not harsh. She sat first, smoothing her coat across her lap before folding her hands together. I sat beside her, close but not quite touching, the kind of distance that hummed with possibility. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It was gentle, like the pause between breaths. I found myself listening to the small details, the rustle of leaves, the faint echo of our footsteps still in my ears, the rhythm of her breathing. Her hand rested on the bench between us, fingers relaxed, almost as if they'd been placed there for me to notice. Slowly, carefully, I let my own hand slide closer, until the edges of our fingers brushed. She didn't pull away. Instead, after a moment, her thumb moved, just the smallest stroke across my knuckle, deliberate enough to send a shiver racing up my arm. That was all it took. The fear, the hesitation, the endless circling of what this was or wasn't supposed to be, it all faded. In its place was something quieter, something stronger, certainty. She shifted then, leaning ever so slightly toward me, her shoulder brushing mine. And after a long breath, she rested her head against my shoulder. The weight of it was light, almost tentative, but it anchored me completely. I turned my head just enough to catch the faint scent of her hair, rain and perfume, and something distinctly her. My heart thudded in my chest, But for once, I didn't fight it. I let the feeling stay. Her voice came softly, almost blending with the breeze. I'm old enough to be careful. The words were familiar now, but hearing them again in this quiet, with her so close, made my chest ache in a new way. She let the silence linger, as if to make sure I remembered. Then she added, just as softly, almost with a smile I could hear more than see, "But with you, I won't be." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting those words settle into me. They weren't reckless. They weren't impulsive. They were a choice. Her choice. And mine too. I didn't answer with anything dramatic. I didn't need to. Instead, I let my hand turn beneath hers, my fingers slipping gently around her palm. She responded instantly, her grip firm, steady, certain. We stayed like that, side by side, hands entwined, her head against my shoulder, as the night deepened around us. No grand declarations, no promises etched into the air. Just presence. Just the quiet certainty that, careful or not, we were exactly where we were meant to be. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace.